I want to invite on stage number 1, Richard Hart, number 2, Jessica Rosenkrantz, and number 3, Per Bolund. A huge round of applause, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please take a seat. Take a seat. Welcome, our dear panelists. Amazing to have you here, and thank you for your time. Of course, all of you are extremely busy, and this is really our opportunity to talk about blockchain, to talk about this new technology and new trend we see in finance, and how governments can work with it, and how regulators can work with it. So can you please introduce yourself very quickly? We have Richard Hart, the influencer, the Bitcoin ideologist, I would say. We have Jessica Rosenkrantz from the moderate party here in Sweden. We have Per Bolund from the government. So my first question to all of you really is, how should governments and regulators work with new technology? How should you relate to new technology? So if we start with Per.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having this arrangement and for allowing me to be here as well. Of course, we think that the development when it comes to cryptocurrency and the digitalization of the economy is extremely interesting and also holds very much potential for the future. So we're trying to always find a way to be in line with the development, to find ways to not over-regulate, which I think is always a risk. I mean, this is still quite a new phenomenon and is really, really vibrant and so much happening all the time. I guess that all of you also find that every time you open a newspaper or browse the web, something new has happened. And of course, there's always a risk that as a regulator, you are a bit too offensive and you try to find regulation perhaps too early in the development. And that is something that we've tried to avoid. One example is, for example, crowdfunding, which is also a development that's been quite rapid and a lot of different solutions, a lot of different business models, and there were demands on the government to go in quite early and regulate the market in order to, well, avoid the bad people to come into this market. But if we had done that, I think that would have been a risk to really just draw on the carpet under the market. And I think that perhaps we should have the same approach when it comes to cryptocurrencies as well. If we move in too early and regulate it too strictly, that would risk not getting the advantages that this market could provide.
Jessica, what is your comments on Per's answer? And what is your answer yourself?
Well, I agree on most things that Pat actually said, so that's good. And thank you for having me here as well. I have to say, this is an amazing crowd. It's very impressive to have all of you people here. Wow. And it's very interesting for me and Pat, I think, because this is not an everyday topic in Parliament, I have to say, and that's both good and bad, I think. Sometimes it's good that politicians don't run too fast and try to regulate everything, which is a risk when you speak to politicians. But it's an increasing trend, however, and my job in Parliament, I'm the spokesperson for the Moderate Party on issues relating to digital issues in general, and vice president of the Committee on Transport and Communications, where the digital issues lie. And for me, it's important to find this balance between making sure that new technologies can grow and take place, creating a sound environment and regulations, but still not moving too fast. And that's a tricky balance sometimes, but you know, in various issues, I've worked a lot with the sharing economy, for instance. You see a tendency from some politicians to want to take all these new things and just put it into the old regulations. And instead, I think we should, of course, make sure that there are some rules and regulations you have to follow, but also see how can actually policy change, how can regulations change to meet the demands of these new technologies and innovations. So it's a possibility, I think, from policy makers to make sure that innovations can grow in our country.
Richard, any thoughts?
I have a great answer on this one, Deed. So, excellent day to have this government conversation. The government solution to most problems is a giant disclaimer that no one reads. So if you take out a loan, they require the loan giver to print a huge, intimidating wall of text that no one ever reads and fewer still understand. And you realize that larger and larger disclaimers and disclosures doesn't actually help anyone. People that were going to make a bad decision still make it. So what you actually need if you want better outcomes for your citizens isn't more draconian laws on disclosure, it's better marketing of better behaviors. So I'll give you an example. Today, the SEC in the United States made a fake ICO website making fun of ICOs. That is excellent engagement. That will actually get good results for the users. That is much better than making ICOs add another 20 paragraphs to the disclosure in the hopes that it'll stop making people stop making bad decisions and investing in stupid ideas, right? So when the government decides to act more like a human and less like a machine and make a parody of something that, you know, is the Wild West, a lot of people, if they haven't lost money yet, should. You know, if you invest in a business that sucks and should have never been created, and then you buy in at some giant valuation that is not reasonable, you should get wrecked. You should lose your money. And one of the only ways to prevent that from happening is to make unreasonable laws restricting speech so that no one can make any type of hype that doesn't work, or to make them add disclosures that no one reads, or to make a funny parody website that actually shows you, hey, look how stupid this is. I think that is a more effective governmental strategy for modifying behaviors of users and getting better outcomes than writing more laws, particularly laws that people can easily avoid by changing where they register their company.
Something very interesting for the entire crypto community in Sweden and just globally is how much are cryptocurrencies on your radar in Parliament and in government? And also, do you have any practical experience yourself? Do you yourself own Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other crypto? Do you have colleagues that own cryptocurrencies?
Well, I see that the fintech development in Sweden and Stockholm has been quite tremendous, and I think we have over 150 fintech companies already in Stockholm, and some of them are also into cryptocurrencies. And I've, as the Minister for Financial Markets, I've taken a point to actually visit them and hear their business models and their views on development and on regulation as well. So I've of course been shown the Bitcoin environment and also shown how to use the wallet and so on. However, I think that my role as a politician is to regulate the market rather than participate in it. So I'm not an active user of cryptocurrency yet. We'll see what happens in the future. But I think that we can easily see that Sweden is a good country to develop new technologies for financial markets in. I think it was only a few years ago that 18% of the fintech investments in Europe actually went to Sweden. And that is, of course, dramatic, a very large part of the investments to quite a small country. And that shows that we have found some ways to move forward in these issues. And I think that would be beneficial also for the cryptocurrency development and the blockchain development as well. So what we've done is, of course, we've had a very rapid digitalization of the economy. It's only a small fraction of percentage points of the transaction in Sweden that actually is done by cash at the moment, and is decreasing extremely rapidly. And this, of course, opens up for new thinking, new ideas, fintech development, adding new values to the customers and consumers, and also opening up for new ways to transfer money, for example, and using cryptocurrencies and these techniques. So, and what we've tried to do is have a positive approach to this, seeing the possibilities and not only the risks, which, of course, are there as well. For example, the Swedish FSA opened up an innovation center, finding ways to contribute and to work together with the business rather than to counteract and hold back. And I think that is the approach that we must have on all fintech areas. But of course, there has to be a balance as well, and there is, of course, always a risk. We have the consumer investor protections, where, of course, it's easy to say that if you make bad financial decisions, that's your own risk, your own fault. But it's harder as a politician when you speak to a retired person who says that, whoops, that was my pension that went overboard, and feel the need for some sort of protection, because I know there are many who give bad advice in the financial markets as well. And of course, as politicians, we have to make sure that the customers, the consumers, also have some level of protection in these markets.
Can I?
Absolutely.
The Australian and Swedish wars on cash are terrible, and they threaten the national security of the nations that engage in them. So if you live in Europe, you have a neighbor in this area called Russia. and every once in a while they invade their neighbors, and it's not that great. So
I can agree on that, yeah.
some Baltic countries kind of team up and run some exercises in the event that that may occur. And some of you guys join NATO and hope to rely on, being a member of a larger team. And so, it's all fun and games to worry about making big returns, but every once in a while a bad thing happens, and you have to be prepared for it. And if Russia or another actor attacks this nation, one of the first things that will go down is your networking. And that means you're not going to have any Bitcoin transactions, and you're not going to have your stupid cards that barely work anyway. Rub my chip. Can we do it again? This isn't even English. It sucks. It's terrible. Destroying cash, one, removes all the privacy from human beings, which quenches their speech. It makes it harder for people to speak truth when they're constantly monitored. The only true speech can exist when a person can speak without repercussion. And if everything that you say is monitored because you paid for it with your trackable credit card, like in the UK, if you say the wrong thing, the police knock on your door. That crap is not fostering a free and open environment and exploration of ideas. It's draconian and it's terrible. And the fact that you guys are removing cash is just basically removing national security in the event of network being down. Now you guys can't use taxis anymore because you don't have a working currency because you went purely digital in a world where digital doesn't work half the time. I mean, a UK bank just had its ATMs and cards down for several weeks, and it was a rather large bank. So cash is important. It's important for privacy. It's important for free speech. It's important so that you don't have to have your eyeballs on what my diet behaviors are if I'm insured. Right? I don't need my health insurance premiums modified on your draconian monitoring of how I use my credit card. They all lose the data anyway. Everything you capture will be lost. So I hate the fact that you guys hate cash. It really bothers me. You guys and Australia.
So,
Yes,
Jessica,
well, just to make a short point, sorry, Jessica, just to clarify, the government has not issued a policy that says that we should be a digitalized economy. We haven't stated that we should get rid of cash. This is something that is driven by the consumers and the providers, the banks. And of course, we feel that consumers should be able to make their own choice in these issues. And if people feel comfortable using cards, even though some other people think it's stupid, I mean, it should be the consumer choice.
Not really. You're in the business of protecting consumers, right? And if part of protecting consumers is making sure that they don't get preyed upon by data, like every piece of data you lose can be used to impersonate you and cause you to incur debts that you're going to be forced to pay. If someone gets a mortgage in your name in the United States, you do actually get screwed up for that. It does have a financial cost to you. So you should be interested in protecting your citizens from the data carnivores out there that will attack them with this over-eyeballing of customers for particularly no good reason. And it's not just the evil companies that take advantages, it's also other nation states. The entire secret database of top-level securities in the United States was leaked and lost to China, which didn't help America. And you can't go rewrite those things. You can change your password, but you can't change your birth date, and you can't change your relationships that you grew up with. That data is lost forever. The only way to protect people's data is to stop them from giving it away so much. So you may not be on team evil trying to kill cash. You're not exactly on team good trying to keep it alive.
Jessica?
Actually, we are.
Well, it's an interesting twist in this debate. You advocating cash, and we're sitting here promoting more digital means. I mean, it's very interesting in the debate in general. Just a few years ago, everything was supposed to be digital, and now we're all thinking Russia, and now we're encouraging people to stick cash under their mattresses and all that. So of course, we have to make sure of both things, to say the very obvious. And I just have to go to a meeting and meet particularly older people to definitely be certain that there's a future for cash as well the coming years, to say the very least. But still, I agree that this is very much consumer driven, and the data issue is, of course, central. I mean, that's a tricky topic, because normally, actually, we have a pretty tough legislation when you look at to use the Swedish phrase, but Datainspektionen or other authorities who are constantly trying to make sure that we cannot test new technology. We could not test autonomous vehicles because then they have a camera on them and then they can spot something that someone can use in a bad way. And that's important, of course, but my perspective is that we in general have pretty tough regulations concerning data. And look at the general data protection regulation that has just come into force. That also is giving more power to the consumer. So I think we need, I still think we need to see people as grown-ups, actually, and that a lot of people want to share their data with others.
I can tell you there is a Swedish politician who I disagree with vehemently on his choice of cryptocurrency. His name's Rick Falkvinge. He's the leader of the Pirate Party. He actually does have some good thoughts in his head, and one of them is that we need a digital analog of a digital representation of our analog rights. So back when you used to send mail to another person, the idea, the concept that someone would open that mail and read it before it got to their destination was unthinkable, was unconscionable. But the fact that you guys in Europe have made a law that you retain every single SMS message for a couple years, well, that's the exact opposite, isn't it? So if I communicate with somebody by mail, I'm protected. But if I communicate with somebody by SMS, I'm screwed. Well, that's odd. It's odd that we have this disconnect between the rights that we fought so hard for in the analog world, and now in the digital world, we just don't care anymore. It also exists with the Fourth Amendment in the United States. You know, you have a right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure, and only upon writ from a judge describing exactly the location and description of what is being searched for can that right to privacy be abridged or annulled. Well, at the border, they decided you don't have those rights anymore. We can ask you for the password to your phone, like in Canada, they won't let you in. You come to Canada, they ask you for the password for your phone, you give it, or they bounce you. And they bounce a lot of people. That's disgusting. You know what's in my phone? A lot of naked pictures of people. Some of them of me, sorry. Some of them other people. None of us probably need your $8 an ass looking at our pictures. $8 an hour paid, dude. Like, it's disgusting that people have forgotten how hard we worked to get those rights in the first place, and to use that as a reference point for the digital laws would be wonderful. And as far as your Data Protection Act goes, it's a joke. You can mandate that people try hard, and they will try hard, and then they will fail because security is hard. The only way to protect people's data is to not capture it. If you capture it, it will be lost, period.
So we've spoken a lot about data, but something else that is very interesting to the whole crypto community in Sweden is the topic of national cryptocurrencies. And we touched on the fact that Sweden is becoming more and more cashless, and even the Swedish central bank is looking at it and thinking, what does it mean for our national security, as you, Richard, said? If both Visa and MasterCard stopped working, suddenly no one can buy food, you can buy anything. And so therefore we have this notion of eKroner, the Swedish digital cash. So what is your view on that? If we start with Per, when it comes to national cryptocurrencies in relation to the independent cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, what is their relation to each other?
Well, I think that the national cryptocurrencies, the eKroner, is of course at a very early stage, so is not possible to say very much about it because the Riksbank has to do a lot of work before we can really see any results and any concrete ideas around that. But of course, it builds on the same general idea that in a digitalized economy, how can we provide meanings of payment in different ways? And you can say anything you want about cryptocurrencies, and they have great possibilities and opportunities, but in the general public there is also a skepticism about this. I mean, a hesitancy to use it. There's not enough knowledge. We've seen the volatility on the market. If I sit on a Bitcoin today, how much will it be worth tomorrow or in 5 years' time? And no one can tell. So of course, if we want people to use digital currencies, there could be a good idea to have a trust provider saying that we issue this, we are some sort of guarantee for this currency. This is, of course, the opposite idea of Bitcoin, where there's no such guarantee at all. And perhaps both these ideas are valid and have the possibility to coexist, at least for time in the future. So which system will win in the end? Well, who knows? We'll have to see. But that is also the reason why I think we should have the policy to let many flowers bloom at this moment where so much is happening. And then eventually we'll see if the national digital currencies take over the game or if it's the other cryptocurrencies.
I think that the currency you can get rich on has a pretty big advantage over the currency that keeps becoming worth less. So if you look at the kroner, it's got a whole lot of digits on the end, right? You could pay 10 euros or you could pay 100 kroner. Well, why is there so many digits? Because they kept printing it and printing it and printing it. So they have a bunch of stupid zeros at the end of their currency now. Some countries have more, some countries have less. I don't think an intelligent investor with more than his petty cash would be wise to invest in the cash that goes down 3 to 5% a year just to inflation, and that's assuming that your central bank doesn't decide to just print more. Not exactly. In the United States, we have a Fed, which is its own separate entity from our actual elected officials. So the people that choose our interest rates and our issuance rate are not elected, which is a little weird. How do you guys do it here? Do you guys have a separate team, or does your government elected people do it?
No, the central bank is independent from the
independent as well
from the government. Yeah.
All right.
And that's the whole of Europe has the same system as well.
That is actually an interesting point you brought up, and I would like to hear Jessica's opinion on the fact that with national cryptocurrencies, you can control inflation. The government will be in control. With Bitcoin, for example, there is no way for one single government to control the inflation and do monetary policy in their country. So do you think it is even possible to have such a currency in Sweden where when the central bank doesn't control anything?
Well, it's pretty far off from where we are right now, so I can only speculate about that. I think, however, that this whole all these different cryptocurrencies growing or being developed, I think that it puts a sound pressure, I would say, on the central bank system. I was invited to this seminar about the Swedish eKroner. However, it was cancelled, so I guess the interest in general wasn't that big. But I think it's good that the central bank has to think about its ways of doing things, and in the long term, that goes back to us as politicians as well. So I'm not sure about your specific question, but going back to the broader perspective, since Per knows all these financial markets perspective a lot better than me. I'm the more broader digital, working every day in the Parliment. I see the big issue for all different kinds of blockchain technology is trust. That's the basic problem. I'm working a lot on digitalization of healthcare or the welfare system in general, public sector, or whatever. And whether you're speaking about cryptocurrencies or blockchain in general, the big problem is trust. And I think that's something we have to work together with authorities, with policy, and also the business in itself. And then you can discuss how much it should be regulated or not. But if it's not regulated, you probably won't have the trust, and then you won't see this technology being used in very many ways.
Something very interesting is also that different countries do national cryptocurrencies for different reasons. So in Sweden, we have the case that we are cashless, and that is the reason why the central bank is thinking about how can we create digital cash. But then you have, for example, countries such as Venezuela. They want to circumvent sanctions, so they want to create their own national cryptocurrency so they can transact globally without using the traditional finance infrastructure. So Richard, what is your view on all of these national cryptocurrencies in comparison to Bitcoin? Is it interesting at all to you, and what does it mean for the whole crypto space?
Basically, crypto was created to fix the problems of government. The first block ever mined, the Genesis block, I believe there's some text, either if not encoded in it, but released along at the same time of it, that says that British Chancellor on verge of another bailout for banks, where the government will unfairly benefit those who have friends in high places. For instance, lenders, right? So people will take huge loans, make mad gains, until it goes wrong. They privatize the gains, they socialize the losses. And that doesn't let capitalism work properly. If you have somebody like that, all right. If you privatize the gains and socialize the losses, it unfairly enriches the capital class that's in control of who kind of gets into office. So that system can't be cured from the inside pretty much. It's basically lost. You can do some things with runoff voting that help, and getting rid of first past the post, and there's some other things you can do to try and fix politics, but the problem of needing to print money to pay bills, it's not going away. These guys have bills they have to pay, and they're denominated in their local currency, and they're going to keep printing that local currency to pay those bills until the game stops. So whether they digitize that bad system of generating debt that's unsustainable on a population that's decreasing in size, so their debt that they've incurred borrowing all that money for all those years, they have to pay back now with a smaller working group of people because people stopped having kids. So if people kept having sex and having kids, that debt would be spread across a lot more folks. Now those folks are screwed. Japan's more screwed than you guys, but you guys aren't really having too many kids. You might want to get more religious around here to start popping out kids.
Guys, on that note, we have a few minutes left, and I suspect that there are questions in the audience to our panelists. So please raise your hands, and then we have Toshe Times, who will run with microphone, or someone else will run with the microphone and ask questions.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's mainly for Per. There is an issue of national security when it comes to cryptocurrencies, where one government wants to influence the other. And I know you are not the Bistånds minister, or there is an advantage of actually as well getting aid to people with governments who wouldn't collaborate through some other means. What does the Bistånds politic, like SIDA, for example, what does it look like when it comes to adopting cryptocurrencies like for aid, and on the other hand, looking at national security? Thank you.
I understand nothing he said. Could you understand?
I had
You got to translate it for
national
me.
security, cryptocurrencies.
I think it's connected to foreign aid as well. If we can use cryptocurrencies in relation to foreign aid.
Yeah, exactly. I
Foreign
mean,
aid.
there are governments that wouldn't basically be qualified as governments for the function of aid. And because I've heard about some proposals where SIDA can use cryptocurrencies to forward aid to some countries, for example, through civil society or some other means. Is there such a thing from finance and Bistånd's perspective? Bistånd is like aid ministry, or Thank you.
Well, I'm not aware of any current projects going on in this field. However, SIDA is of course always looking for new ways to channel the aid, so to make it as efficient as possible, to make sure that the receivers actually get the money in the way that they should. And we have of course problems channeling through governments who not always look for the best of their citizens, and sometimes a lot of money gets stuck in the way. So we've worked a lot in Sweden also on remittances, people sending money back to their homes. And of course cryptocurrencies can be a very efficient way to achieve that, and actually that is a much larger flow of capital than aid in the world today, much larger. So if we can get remittances to work much better, I think that would be even more providing growth and development in developing countries than only foreign aid in itself. But SIDA is free to find new ways to channel aid. So I think that could be a very, very interesting potential for the future.
Jessica?
Well, just to add, I mean, the aid as such has had some problems with credibility at times, because we can't really follow up where the money goes. And I think blockchain as such is a huge possibility to make sure that we actually can have transparent systems and actually follow up on the aid that is given. So it's a very anti-corruption mean in that way.
Blockchain's 100% useless for that. It'd be worse. The guy that was stealing the money the old way will be able to hide it better this way. So blockchains are useful for censorship resistance, getting rich, speculation, not so much helping the world, to tell you the truth.
Should we go home now?
Like if you want to make the world better and people need food, you could stop giving them money to buy food, and you could just spend food. And then if he still resells it, it sucks, but he's less likely to resell it, because at least he doesn't get as much of the money he stole, right? Like if he steals the sandwiches. So you're better off sending him sandwiches than you are sending him cash and trying to like anti-money launder it. Here's the reason blockchain doesn't help with most things. If the blockchain stays in the digital world, it's trustless and awesome. If the blockchain touches the real world, like sandwich world, the guy handling the sandwiches lies to the blockchain, and then the blockchain can't help you. So as soon as you try and touch the real world with your blockchain project, it stops being useful. Because the guy that converts the data in the real world to tell the computer what's going on, that guy lies. And if you have to trust that guy anyway to not lie, then you can trust that guy to run the same system on a SQL database or on the legacy system. So blockchains only solve trust in the purely digital domain. If you touch the real world, completely useless.
More questions to our panelists. I think we have time for one more question, unfortunately. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Just a quick one. How are you planning to, dealing with tokenized companies? So when companies starting not only doing ICOs but tokenizing their businesses to give maybe more to users, for example, do you have any plans to deal with that? Because the conversation has been more or less around national cryptocurrencies, but what about businesses? Because more like usually it's business who make changes or try to foster change. Thank you.
So just to add some comments to that, this is a trend we see currently that companies are doing so-called ICOs, raising money through tokens, and then they have this token that can do different things, maybe in their IT infrastructure, on their website, in their current business model. And currently, there are regulatory questions. So for example, people in Sweden, they do not know if they could do it in Sweden because what is their token? Is it a security? Is it a utility? So they move to other places where it is more clear. Regulations are more clear. So do you have any experience with that when you have companies issuing tokens and they sell those tokens to general public?
Well, there is, of course, ICOs in Sweden as well, and sometimes there's a view that we're really left in the backwaters and nothing is happening, but actually if you compare to our Nordic neighbors or to the European level, Sweden is quite in the front. So, but of course there's always more to be done. But I think that ICOs is of course a situation of heaven or hell. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of companies that can get funding and that otherwise wouldn't have had a chance. But we also know that there is a lot of fraud in this area. Some studies have said that almost 80% of the ICOs are really not for the benefit of the consumers or for real investments. So, of course, we have to find a way to also make sure that there is a legitimacy in the market. But then again, when it comes to future business models around cryptocurrencies, I'm not the guy to tell about that. I think there are huge opportunities, and we already see digital actors taking payments in cryptocurrencies, for example, and I think it's only the start. So I think that this is a time where we have to let the markets find the new solutions, and then in the end we'll have to see if there is a need for a regulation. Of course, we have a big ear and are listening to the needs, but at this point in time I don't see that we have the opportunities or the necessity to actually have a national regulation. On the other hand, on the European level, there is a work that is starting up. The Commission has in their fintech paper said that they will closely monitor the cryptocurrency and see whether there's a possibility to find a suitable regulation on the European level. And my view is that perhaps this should be on the international level through the G20 or something, because this is an international phenomenon.
Jessica?
Well, my answer is more in a more broader sense. Let's just face it, the future of the economy in general is the digital economy. That's where the jobs are growing, and we need to make sure that investments and companies and jobs grow here and not in other countries. That's the national point of view, right? If we want to keep Sweden growing, we have to make sure we have a sound and good business climate. And I think that's very important as well. On top of these very specific issues, I think it's very important to realize that, sorry, Per, but this government has actually raised taxes with 60 billions during this term. We have seen an increased bureaucracy, administration. So on top of these, sometimes unclear rules, we have a actually a development going in the wrong way, I would say, with increased taxes and more bureaucracy. And that's not the way forward when we see countries as Estonia or other countries actually being very progressive in making sure that digital companies, startups, investors want to have their businesses there. So that's a task for policymakers going forward, to decrease taxes and decrease regulation in that sense.
The United States is kicking ass on this, actually. So the state of Delaware recently passed legislation making it legal to track ownership of shares in a company on a digital ledger, which is a breakthrough. The state of Wyoming is passing legislation regarding hands-off treatment of utility tokens and classifying what a utility token is. Now, just to let you know how important Delaware is, the vast majority of public companies in the United States are incorporated in Delaware. So for that jurisdiction to let you know that you could digitally account for share ownership on a ledger makes token for equity a lot easier pill to swallow. So don't be surprised if you see a token for equity coming out of Richard's team sometime soon.
On that note, I want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for your time, for being here and sharing your views. And also thank you everyone who has asked questions. Please stay seated. We have a present for you.
Oh,
that
Hope it's tokens.
a Bitcoin.
you can use maybe in Parliament, maybe in government. But this is a hardware wallet where you can store your cryptocurrencies. So Per, if you get Bitcoin, this is the thing you should use to store it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Jessica,
Thank you.
the same for you. Richard, you already have one. You have two.
Man,
This
And
I need more than
looks
one,
very
bro.
physical. I thought it was a digital currency.
Yeah, but this is another layer of security, so you can have it more safe. So a huge round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Please. Tack så jättemycket.
Tack.
Tackar.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.